Hi, Misha here, and I guess we all survived Christmas. Because if we didn't survive it, we wouldn't be watching this video, right? Hope everyone did have a good holiday. And this is part 3 or episode 3 in kind of my Patreon awareness series or end of the year blitz for the channel. As you know, 2021 has had a lot of changes. Jay had to go for greener and less gun-filled pastures, and I don't want to say it's been a struggle. In fact, I've really enjoyed videos more this year than I think I did in 2020. But, well, let's be honest, I'm blind, so this is not the easiest thing for me to manage alone. Luckily, about halfway through the year, I did get a good amount of help from J-Ro, and working on trying to bring a couple of other people on board. And on top of that, hoping to maybe do some traveling in 2022 since, you know what's at least peaked and subsiding now. But of course, that all kind of comes into funding. In the past, frankly, we operated this channel at a loss. But that was okay because we were going to shoot regardless. So even an extra 10, 20 bucks a month just went to ammo and paying for that. And over the years, it's kind of started to go from a loss to just a minor loss to me kind of breaking even Steven some months. Yeah, I have not been pleased with the direction that Gunbroker has been going and just things like that. So I'm really wanting to shift more towards doing videos. Not full time, but maybe, you know, kind of a 2 part-time job situation thing. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of trying to do videos to raise awareness and ask people if they can to go over and check out the Patreon. But of course, if you can't, just liking, sharing, subscribing, and definitely commenting. I really love it when people comment so we get to know each other. And that's kind of the purpose of these videos, is just, you know, you get to know me a little more and how I got into guns. Because when I started, I was completely ignorant. I grew up shooting guns, but kind of fell away for the better part of a decade and then found them again in my early 20s. And in some ways, that was the best thing for me. It kind of kept me out of too much trouble in college and was just a really rewarding thing. In the first video, I mostly talked about the PPK because it was technically the first gun I bought by myself straight out. In video 2, I talked about bolt actions and how they're super not boring. And in video 3, I want to talk about other handguns, namely surplus. But, you know, the early handguns I picked up after the PPK. So I have a couple of Makarovs, a Bulgarian military, and a Russian commercial. And then a couple of Czech guns, a VZ50 and a VZ52. Moving on, my introduction into revolvers with the Enfield number 2 and the Smith & Wesson 1917. And then I did get some modern guns back in 2002, 2003. And here's 2 of them, the Walther P99 Generation 1 and the Glock 34 Generation 3. Some of these are my original guns from back then, and some of them are upgrades or replacements of those guns. So I thought I'd just kind of talk about how I got into them, what I think, and what have you. And as kind of with video 1, there will be an addendum or more in a different video for Patreons. So if you're over there, go check it out. I'll post it there. And also kind of did a supplemental black box over on my personal channel called Misha. Again, just hanging out. It's the holiday season, and you know, if you need a break from family or travel, we can hang out here and chill. Or, you know, if you're alone for various reasons or in a foreign country, been there, done that myself, been in foreign countries over holidays, yeah, here I am. Maybe we can just kind of hang out a bit. So with that, some of my early handguns that weren't Walthers. The good old Bulgarian Makarov, the PM pistol, 9x18. This is not my original. This is a more recent import. This has had a really interesting history. Now, when I first bought my PPK, as I said in the first video, I was a little afraid to not only shoot it, but handle it. Well, one of my friends at the time, that he really got me into firearms, said, get a Makarov. And what's that? Well, it's a Russian copy of a PPK. He's not wrong. I mean, we've had none of it. It does have the wraparound grip like a PPK, unlike a PP, but it has a barrel length of about 3.8 inches, more like a PP. The main thing is it's just simple, durable, dependable. One thing he made sure to point out to me, the safety is reversed from a PPK on a Makarov, but it's still a single double action, just a very durable gun. And back then, it was a great time to buy because the Bulgarians were just coming in. They were $89.95 retail with 2 mags, a leather holster, cleaning rod, leather kind of hide type lanyard. Now the conditions with those batches were, worn sometimes, but they did have smaller import marks. Now those at that time were just coming with the thumb rest grips. It wouldn't be till a little bit later they started including both the thumb rest grip, which had to be included for the 1968 points thing, like we talked about with the PPK, so they could retain their original military sights. They put a little thumb rest grip. But the neat thing is the way the 68 thing is written, once it's imported and sold here, it doesn't matter. So I picked one up and really fell in love. The cartridge was boomy, but still pleasant. The gun was just dirt simple and reliable. I remember once I took it out to the range and a friend of a friend was there, and it was caught back like this, empty, and I said, safe the gun. He literally took the safety off. This one doesn't want to pop out, but he over rotated the safety and just pulled it out, which is part of the disassembly, so it's fine. He didn't damage it, but that's the first time when I've asked someone to safe a gun that they literally took the safety off and handed it to me. I also had someone once load the bullets in backwards. That was a special day. So my Makarov went a lot of places, but eventually I sold it because they quit importing these for a while, and prices went from $100 or less to like $300. And when they came back around, they didn't really get below $200 again. But this really started a love affair with this type of gun. And since it had the same basic manual of arms as my PPK, it just made sense. And again, it was a great early gun to have, and one of the earliest ones I bought under my own cognition. And it's also kind of what got me into comblock guns, because getting an old comblock gun was still very much a novelty, at least to me back then. And to have a comblock sight. And I love rifles, but there's something a little more exotic and high class about a pistol, even a Makarov. And it was just amazing that you could get something this solid and steel for $100 or less. And ammo wasn't too hard to find. You could pick up a box of 50 for $10 to $15 back then. Not too bad. And of course, we've had several types, so we've talked about it in videos. So I got this one, and that actually led me down a rabbit hole of, where did I put the other one? I don't know, over here, of getting several others. Now, original Russian military Makarovs are pretty uncommon in the USA for various legal reasons, both in the US and Russia. I do have one. Some of them came in with these Bulgarian guns called Sneaks, but that's a story for another day. But what we did have for a time in the 90s were commercial guns, usually under the IJ series. These are made at Izhevsk, later Izhmash and Imes and Bakel brand names, which is the original factory. So the Makarov was designed based somewhat on the PP, PPK, but also the 9x18 cartridge it fired was based on World War II German developments in the 9x18 Ultra, which would evolve in Germany to become 9x18 Police. Much confusingly, same name, totally different cartridge bullet. The thing is, 9x18 Police is about a 9.02 diameter bullet. Makarov is 9.2 millimeter diameter bullet. That's not going to work real well. Anyway, we got these commercial guns. Now, a lot of them were in 380, 9x17, but I was always a fan of 9x18. For one thing, I was stocking it, and back when you only have 8, 10 guns, you pretty much shoot them all, except for that PPK. I didn't want to start stocking 380. I had 32, I had 9x18, seemed good enough to me, and I had 9mm Luger. And the few times I did shoot other friends' 380s, they didn't work well. They jammed on me, a lot of stovepiping. I don't know. I just wasn't impressed, and I thought Makarov is pretty much the same as 380, but more powerful. The Russian guns would come in, but they would stop in 94 with some trade agreement changes, with the last ones sold here in 95 and a few old stock in 96. So by the time I got into guns, they were pretty much secondary market. One of my local haunts, not the same shop I got those bolt actions at, but the one here close to my place, had this one day, came in. They had $150 on it, and I had to have it. That's because it's a double stack. I had been asking them for a year if any double stack Max came in, and I needed not just a double stack, but a double stack in 9x18. What's neat is this double stack magazine system was created in the late 80s and early 90s as a potential upgrade of the standard PM called the PMM. They also made an upgraded, more potent cartridge, and that was turned into the commercial version here. I just, fell in love. Now, to be fair, these have the target sights, the adjustable sights. These were installed in Russia to comply with the points system. Nice thing is it does have the original grips with lanyard staple. And interestingly, it has a phosphated frame and a blued slide. I think that's because they use the same slides for double or single stack, whereas the frames are different on the double. Another neat thing about these that I soon discovered is that the 8-round mags actually fit and feed just fine in the double stack. They wiggle around a bit, but since this is Russia we're talking about, the tolerances are so that they still feed just fine. They even hold open. Pretty nifty, I think. So, as I said, this was $150. I was a college student. I had to put it on layaway. One of the first guns I ever layawayed. And I had to pay it off over a couple of months. Oh, I was so excited the day I got to take it home. And, I don't know, it was just kind of one of those guns. I just, for whatever reason, because this was the only higher capacity Makarov you could get then. This is before the VZ82s came in, because they weren't going to import the 82s back in the early 2000s because we still had the assault weapons ban and the 10-round mag limit. And this was the only way to really get a high cap one at that time. And of course, anything that was quote-unquote high cap then was desirable. I think that's why this was $150 instead of $100. But this is the original one. And I had several other Makarovs too. I picked up a Polish P64, eventually a Hungarian PA63, and several others that you've seen. And when the assault weapons ban did sunset, I definitely picked up a VZ82. But I didn't just stop there. Developing a taste and appreciation for comb block, I next wanted to get something in 7.62 25 Tokarev. And so, it's actually on my birthday, I picked up this gun. I can't remember if it was, I think it was birthday of 2002. Of course, this is the Czech VZ52. But I actually didn't mean to get this gun. I had been in that shop earlier that year, and they had handed me one of these, a VZ50, in the box. It was in that old communist cardboard box. It just looked neat, and I knew it was kind of another 32 Walther style gun. I knew I liked them. And that's what I went to buy. Either I didn't say VZ50, I probably said CZ50 at that time, to be honest with you. Maybe I said 52. Maybe they misheard me. I don't know. But this is what they brought out and showed me. I thought, it's similar to what I thought I was wanting because of the kind of similar grips and everything. But I thought it seems a little bigger. But you know what? It was $49.95 straight from the importer, 2 mags, holster, and it fired Tokarev. And I've been kind of wanting to pick up a Tokarev anyway. At that time, it was kind of hard to find TT-33s. So I took it home. I love this gun for its mechanics. It's very well made. It's mechanically interesting. I deplore shooting it. I do not like shooting it. It does not fit my hand well. It has kind of a trapezoidal grip, very deep. It also has sharp edges. It just is not comfortable to me. The mag release is less than ideal. No external release. Single action only. It has a decocker, but never trust it because with time these can break and actually fire when you do that. Or these are known for having brittle firing pins. The firing pin is very long, so if you dry fire it a bunch or the pin gets weak, it will break. Mine has its original pin because I never would dry fire it, but 2 friends bought these too because again they were affordable. And broke their firing pins. Luckily, stainless steel replacements have always been available. I love the Czech finish, this kind of almost self-lubricating. This one has more of the gray finish. Some later ones had more of a blue-looking finish. I don't think it's actually bluing, but it looks blue, or so I'm told. Neat guns, and again, a lot of friends had these. The funny thing is, these are $50. The ammo, but this is before a lot of that surplus came in, was like $15 to $20 a box. So 2 boxes of ammo, 3 for sure, cost about as much as the gun itself. So that was kind of the only drawback. But then again, based on how this shot, I wasn't going to shoot more than a box in a day anyway. I did actually eventually get this VZ50, but it would have to wait. In fact, I did not get this one until I had my firearms license, and this was one of the first odd lots buys I did from Century, at least several. They had a few of these that were minor blims or you fix thems or various things, but they were dirt cheap, like $40, and that kind of initiated a group buy with some forums members. It was a lot of fun. It was kind of fun going through these, checking out the different markings. The VZ50 and the later VZ70 aren't often thought of, but they're really well-made guns. Maybe not outstanding or eye-catching, but neat. So I did eventually get one. And truth is, I like shooting it more than the VZ52. But with that, it wasn't just all comm-block guns for me, even in the beginning. This was my very first revolver, the Enfield number 2 Mark I Star. I had held off getting into revolvers for a couple of years, finally giving in the winter of 2003. In fact, I remember it very clearly. A friend from high school, we were both home for Christmas in college. We went to different universities at that time. He drove me to that gun shop where I got those bolt actions, which was down in Fort Smith, actually where Walther is today. And it was essentially in a snowstorm on a Saturday morning. We headed down, the weather was iffy. And we're like, oh, we can beat it. We did get there. We beat it. It was blisteringly cold. We get back to his house just as the roads were getting absolute crap. Fun memories. And it's a good, honest number 2. Honest wear. Hasn't been monkeyed with, reblued. That's the thing about revolvers. With bolt actions, you have to worry about them being sporterized. With revolvers, it's rebluing. Guys really like to do it. I think what did it for me on this that I really liked back in the day were the grips. These kind of Bakelite grips with the cutout and the disc in them. It just did it for me. It kind of seemed like a modern-esque gun. And that's right when I was getting my first infield rifle. So it just seemed like a good idea to have the revolver companion. This is the DAO version, which most of them either were made as or converted to. And of course it fires 38-200, which is British speak, their version of 38 Smith & Wesson. These are not 38 specials. And this would be one of the early guns I actually bought more collector interest than shooting. I didn't really buy it with the notion of shooting it. In fact, I don't think I've ever shot this one. I don't know. I've had a few of these over the years. But I did get my next wheel gun for shooting. Being best pleased with the infield, I next set my sights on getting a 1917 because it was in 45 ACP and I already stocked that ammo and I like the connection and history. Now this is not my original one. My first one was actually a Brazilian, which is the model 1937. Very similar to this, but it has the more traditional grips. Now that gun was a little rough. I mean, it worked well, but it had some little bit of pitting and surface wear, and it was kind of a sad story how I ended up with it. It came to a local pawn shop I frequented because an old man had it, and he was, well, frankly, dying of cancer. He was very sick with cancer, and he brought it in, telling him, "Take this from me because I might decide to end it prematurely one night," and he didn't want that temptation. So it made me sad. On the other hand, I gave it a good home and at least maybe helped give him a few more days, weeks, maybe even years. Maybe he beat it. Who knows? I wish him the best. But I had that for a long time, shot it. But a forums member years ago helped me find quite a nice, I think, Smith & Wesson. And so to pay for this, I sold that Brazilian. I think I originally paid $100 or $150 for the Brazilian. And even though it was a little rough, I think it brought like 3 or 4 years later. We're talking well over 10 years later at this point. And so that went a long way to paying for this. I think this one was $5. So I had to go a little bit in the hole, but I'm pleased with it. And I brought this out too because this kind of started me on a Smith & Wesson run. I've developed a decent respect for revolvers, but I've always liked Smiths. It's just kind of, I find them that happy in between. Rugers are great, but they're very workaday guns, and they're not really historical. Obviously not, because the company didn't exist in World War I and World War II. Colts are great, but collectors have driven their prices astronomical. Smith & Wesson's right there in the middle. They're historical, good quality, maybe not as strong as a Ruger, but pretty darn strong. And prices are fair. You could get a Victory model or even a 1917 for not crazy money. So I'm glad I got into it. I'm still not the biggest revolver person, but it's nice to have a few kicking about just for fun. Once in a while. Just 'cause. Now, of course, in more recent years, Jay really has gotten into revolvers himself, but whereas I'm into the old historical ones, he likes the modern revolvers. If you're just talking about a well-made gun, I know a lot of people talk about the Colt Python, but try picking up a registered Magnum from Smith & Wesson made in the 1930s. Talk about a piece of art in gun form. I'm telling you. It's just fantastic. And with that, from Revolvers, the more classic guns, let's end with modern guns. The Walther P99. And this is a Generation 1. So this was before they started doing the different names like AS. Although it does have the so-called military frame, which is just green. That's fine. I've told the story many times, but this gun just works for me. Just does it. Being so happy with the PP, PPK, and whatnot, I thought maybe it'd be cool to get a modern Walther. Now, Walther only showed this gun off beginning in 1996. It hit the market in 97, and they weren't really common in the USA until 1999. And yes, these did start to appear in later Bond films, which just shot them even higher in people's esteem. And this was Walther's attempt to kind of regain the market. The P88 was a fantastic gun. Frankly, too fantastic, too well done, too refined, too fidgety, too German. So much so that it ultimately led to the company changing hands, getting out of the family, and being restructured. But it was time. This is when Smith & Wesson replaces Inter Arms here in the USA too. This also would lead to the SW99 and all that stuff. But yeah, as it turns out, there was a gun shop just a few blocks from my townhouse back in 2002. Yeah, 2002. We moved there because it was that summer. And it was the first place I'd ever encountered that had one of these in person. And I just wanted to hold it because I read about it and it sounded neat. Like the interchangeable back straps. That was a new thing at that time. Also, the trigger system. I was very curious about how it worked. We've got a decocker. We've got a double action. And of course, you can do that and then do that for a single action. Or if you have it cocked, you can decock. Yeah, this is also useful for disassembly. Some people don't like that you have to pull the trigger on, say, a Glock to disassemble it. So you can hit the decocker and disassemble without having to touch the trigger. Pretty standard inside otherwise, but it's a neat system, and I think it just caught me because it was a Walther. People didn't have them. It was different. Now, originally, because assault weapons ban, these came with dorky 10-round mags, but I soon replaced it with the proper 16. Now, Generation 1s have these slick side mags that are blued. Gen 2, they actually go down to 15 rounds, and they put little ribs in the mags. In Gen 3, they go away from the shiny blued finish to a more durable matte blue. It might even be later coated, PVD, whatever. But the Gen 1 is still kind of where my heart's at because it was the first one. The Gen 2s are great, and I do have a Gen 2 compact. And the line expanded and, of course, turned it into the Poopy Q. The gun still fits my hands so well. Even the double action trigger is fine, and the single is quite short for a service gun. But yeah, this was my first kind of modern style gun. Picked it up. It was gently used. They said unfired. Might have been. Price point on these back then, I think it was $5 or $6, which was an awful lot of money. That was pretty much what I'd saved up working all summer after paying bills. So, but it was incredibly worth it, and only reinforced my original decision to kind of go with Walther. Some people go HK. I never could afford HK back then, I'll be honest with you. I knew what they were, I just couldn't afford it. But Walther, I knew it was German, and to me, the quality seemed just as well. And while I thought it was a good gun, everyone was talking about Glock back then. Enter my 34 Gen 3. Now, I had actually had experience with Glock before a lot of people, because as I've said, my brother was issued an original Generation 1 17 back in the late 80s, 87, 88, 89. He actually kept that gun for a very long time. Finally, after years and years, the frame cracked when a bad reload at the police academy, when he was doing quals, exploded in it. Bruised his hand, barely hurt the gun, but eventually led to a stress fracture. Keep in mind it was a Generation 1. Even though the gun was like 20 years old by that point, Glock actually replaced his slide free of charge. And this was his private gun at this point. He had been given the option to purchase it and happily did so. So good on Glock. But unfortunately, when they did that, because it was then, it went from having a Generation 1 slide to having, a frame, to having a Generation 3. What they did is they took the serial plate out and put it in. Back then, the ATF let them do that. They stopped that a few years ago. So I knew what Glocks were, and I was happy with my Walther. But I thought, what the hey? A local gun shop. Well, I don't think I'm one I've mentioned yet. I bought my first Benelli there. It was kind of a higher-end sporting goods. I bought my first Wilson Combat there eventually. They were doing a Glock promo deal. They had the Glock rep there. They were giving t-shirts, went in, and I bought this one. This was probably the first modern gun that I bought brand spanking new. And I had looked on Glock's website many times trying to figure out which model to get. 17, 19, the 26 had come out recently. But I decided on the 34. I like the long barrel. And I really like the extended controls. Well, a little bit. And I especially like the fact that it had the lighter disconnector from the factory, because at this time I didn't know how to do that kind of work. So yeah, and while it's still a Glock trigger, it's a better Glock trigger, and it was about as good as you could get in 2002. So this was my first. I did actually sell it to a family member about 5-6 years later, because he really liked shooting it, and I was traveling a lot overseas anyway. And he had it and didn't want to get rid of it, even when I came back and got married and was pretty stable. But, a few years ago, it came back home to me. And it's had a lot of rounds through it, and still is quite tight. And it has that kind of orange peel tinifer finish that people really like. It does feel cool. So it's a good Glock. It really is. I still like the Walther better, but I'm happy I have it, and I'm happy I have this back. And this has been a popular gun, and everyone does need a Glock. Everyone does, right? And of course, handguns went on from there, much like with other things when the assault weapons ban sunset, that opened the door further for things. But yeah, this is kind of some of my earliest. On the left, these are my original guns. Again, these are the ones that I purchased and never replaced, and probably never will. These are the ones that I had examples of back then, but I have upgraded. Like I said, on the 50, it's kind of a little bit of a cheat, because I meant to buy one, but I didn't until I had my FFL, but I thought I'd bring it out because it's kind of a fun story. The Makarov, I upgraded to a nicer one to save the import marking. What do you do? Smith & Wesson was definitely an upgrade. Original World War I with original grips for a Brazilian. And actually, the P99 here is not my original. That's because my original, although it was just identical to this, was in .40 caliber. Yeah, during the assault weapons ban, since we could only have 10 rounds, it seemed logical to me, since the capacity for 40 Smith & Wesson was 12, and for 9 was 16. And we had no idea the assault weapons ban was going to sunset in a few years. I thought, well, if I'm only going to have 10-9 or 10-40, might as well have 10 of the bigger bullets. Plus, in the late 90s and early 2000s, 40 was kind of the new thing. Keep in mind, this was before a lot of the newer 9mm and 45 defensive loads came out. As I tell people, 40 kind of stagnated back then. There's not been a lot of bullets made and projectiles and work done. 9mm with the plus P and plus P plus and all the new cavitating and hydromatic whatever rounds, even 45 for the same thing, it's really got to the point now that a 9mm defensive load can do just as much effectiveness as a 40. So there's just really no reason for a 40, which is really funny. While doing this video, I had a call from one of my distributors, and they had Kel-Tec sub 2000s come in. First ones I've heard about since early year. They're in 40 caliber. That's the first new production 40 caliber Smith & Wesson anything I've seen in I don't know how long. If you want to see 40 caliber Smith & Wesson guns, go to the used section of just about any big gun shop, and they will be there in droves for like 200 to 250 bucks. I don't know why Kel-Tec used their production capacity to do 40 sub 2000s instead of 9. I was actually telling the sales guy, I said, if they're going to do a sub 2000 like that, do it in 10mm. That'd be kind of neat. Maybe a little punchy, but neat. But yeah, these are my handguns, at least kind of what I thought would be fun to talk about, and how I got started. And again, they were either surplus. Pretty much all my original guns were used. This was my first new modern gun ever, and it took a couple of years to save up and get there. Like I said, even my first P99 was lightly used, gently used. This one wasn't just used, it was a you fix 'em too. I'm not ashamed to do that, especially when things go. And that's where collections kind of get started. I bought what was available, and I guess it was a happy coincidence that I happened to be interested in the comm block in the Soviet Union, so the fact that their stuff happened to be at its cheapest point in the mid-late 90s and early 2000s just worked out fantastic. So that's, episode 3. Next time we'll get back to some rifles, some semi-automatic rifles, self-loading, or full auto conversions, if you will. Whatever. Talk about that. But in the interim, I'd love to hear about your surplus guns and early handgun purchases. You know, in the USA, it's for anyone outside the country, you have to be 21 to buy a handgun. You can be 18 to buy a rifle or shotgun, but for a revolver or automatic pistol, you have to be 21. And there's a little more scrutiny, like if you buy more than 2 in a week, at least from the same shop, you have to fill out a multiple handgun report. Well, the shop does. There's more attention paid to handguns. And that really dates back all the way to the 1930s and all that jazz. So there is something a little more special about getting a handgun, I would say. And I certainly felt so when I was 22, because it was something I was only recently able to do, that and drinking. Probably luckily for my liver, I couldn't afford to both drink and buy guns, so I usually opted for the guns. Usually. I greatly appreciate you tuning in, hanging out with me. Again, I hope everyone had a happy and safe, or at least restful, holiday. Keep doing these videos throughout this week till New Year's. Probably when you're seeing this, we'll be shooting, get some new stuff to talk about, and hope to have some more new guns and maybe go to some new places in 2022. And hopefully never have to hear the word Corona or COVID again. That'd be great. Yeah. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can just like, share, and subscribe. That's awesome. Commenting, I don't know if it actually helps the channel like with YouTube, but it makes me happy, so please comment. And if you'd like to, do something else or more, go click on the link to our Patreon page. Bucking up a month, you can involve yourself in the Q&A sessions. And $5 and up, you kind of get a sneak peek at upcoming videos and can request videos. And $10 and up, you pretty much can get a direct line to me to ask me about a gun technical question, or if this is a good buy, or what have you, and whatever. Just pretty much, I'm at your disposal for that. And I am considering doing a new tier. I don't know what the perks would be, but it's definitely going to be called the Dillweed tier. People that are on my personal channel, Misha, know what I'm talking about. If not, go over and check it out. It was a recent black box I did right before the holidays. Alrighty, guys, I'm getting hungry, so I'm going to go have dinner. This is Misha. Catch you very soon. Next time.